Hello everyone, I hope you guys are having a great day. For today's video, I am going to go over my round 3 at US Team Amateurs 2024. For your information, I will put the link to the tournament description as well as the time format in the description down below. So, going into this round, we had a tough loss in round 2 where my both 2 and 3 lost and I drew. And in this round, we got a very easy pairing because my opponent, which is the best player on the team, is less than 1,000 rating. So this was expected to be a very quick round for my team. But even though my opponent is very low rated, I am not slacking off because of that. I wanted to try my best to win as quickly as possible. That has been kind of one of my weakness, is the ability to win quickly. And also, since my opponent is 1,000, I will try out the modern defense regardless of E4 and D4. I was only going to try the modern defense against E4, but since he's low rated enough, I can probably try against D4 as well. So my opponent started with E4. And I go with my plan, going G6. And the thing is, I have been struggling to find a good opening against E4 since whenever I play Sicilian, which is my main weapon, I get all the anti-Sicilian in the world. So I want an opening that can basically give me interesting games while being both positional and tactical. Unlike the Sicilian, where everyone knows theory, and although I do have the upper hand, there are several lines that just kind of give a draw. So, and I found a modern to be a very good weapon against lower rated player specifically. So here he went D4, the center, and I go Bishop G7. And here, to my surprise, he went Bishop E3. Which is actually quite a tricky move since it delays the knight development, which decides the system that I will be playing. However, I have prep against this. So here I went D5 right away. So the point here is that since white haven't played knight C3, you are allowed to play D5. Although, in my prep, if white plays knight c3, I will still play d5. But here it just kind of, I don't know, it's kind of just better for me because the knight is not here, so I can take it right back. So say if then queen takes, and if knight c3, this is actually kind of equal, right? Just queen a5, and now I got rid of the e4 pawn, and now white center is not as strong as was anymore. So here, my opponent went e5, which is understandable. I went c5, and c3, knight c6, knight to f3. Here, the more critical positional line is f4. So after f4, kind of knight h6 is the main move here. Before knight f3, and f4 before knight f3 is simply just trying to add protection to the e5 pawn because I'm putting a lot of pressure into the center. So, but white didn't do that and play knight f3 right away, which is much easier for me to play now, since now I can just play bishop g4. And now I'm pinning this knight to the queen. There's not that much white can do about this, because the purpose of the bishop here is just to straight up trading the knight. But so far my opponent is playing pretty well. So bishop b5, which is also one of a very popular move. It is also a very good move as well. And here I play e6, which is logical, but somewhat inaccurate. The engine said that I should delay e6 as long as possible and just complete other developments. So say, actually, I can go either knight h6 or just take on d4, which is another option. Because after e6, he played the best move, which is bishop takes c6. And I kind of, I will say that he didn't play it on purpose because he knows theory. But I mean, it's still a pretty good move regardless. So pawn takes c6 in h3. And here, I just want to note that this is what a typical lower rated player would do. So they see a piece in their territory, right? And I try to kick it out. However, if you look at my bishop right here, right? It doesn't really have any good square besides f5. So if h3, then it just makes me take the knight anyways. But my whole point is just to take the knight. So it's basically a waste move, which practically speaking is sort of an inaccuracy. So h3, but it's still fine for white. Bishop f3, queen takes f3, and now f6. I don't know why I attacked the center too early when I could have been patient and do it after I castle. Since it was lower rated, I was just trying to pressure really hard into the center to see what my opponent would do, because I kind of expected my opponent to mess it up, but then I didn't realize that white can actually just ignore the threat. So here white went 2, which still ignores the threat. So here, know that if white takes a pawn and I take with knight, then I'm just better, because now I destroy white's center pretty much. Sure, white can take the pawn on c5, but that actually doesn't really mean anything. Now I have a very nice triangular pawn on the center, and this position is pretty good for black. I also have the f file, which then here I can just castle, and now I have the f file to play. So pawn takes d4. I figure that I should take this pawn at some point, right? And here he played pretty smart as well. So here's the thing. The engine said that white could actually just take on f6, which is pretty hilarious. But I figured that since my opponent wouldn't see it, so I didn't see it in the game either, actually. I thought about it for a brief moment, but I didn't think it would actually that serious. So instead my opponent just, and actually my opponent took. I'm sorry. So here, this is fine. Oh, what I meant is that after here, white can actually just just sacrifice a pawn here with bishop takes c5, and here white castles, and white get all the initiative that black doesn't have. So basically, I have the center, but my pawn structure is simply really weak, and there's nothing I can do, because after knight e7, rook e1, I actually can't castle anymore. So, and this game will be really hard to play. But lucky my opponent didn't see that, so he took on f6 instead. So I took with the knight, he took with the bishop, and now I castle. The power, so here's the power of modern, right? So far what I show you is that I make quite a few inaccuracy. But the point here is that even if I make some inaccuracy, it might not be punished by lower rated player, which is exactly why I want to play this opening. I mean, most inaccuracy from white is really positional. Black, I'm sorry, are very positional. So if white doesn't know theory, there's actually not that much white can do. So here, since I was able to castle, I have a really good position to play. So queen e3. And now I went e5, which is a pretty good move. Temporarily sacrificing a pawn. So I could protect it with something like rook e8, but then after just something like, I don't know, bishop e5 or knight f3, right? Now e5 is not really a good move anymore, and now my pawn is kind of becoming permanently weak. And there's also knight e5, knight g5, knight e6 threat. So I kind of didn't like that. Also, e5 with e5, white actually can't take the pawn. So there's a line from the engine that allows white to take the pawn. However, it is very complicated where white actually sacrifices the queen and get enough material. So the line goes like this. Takes e5, knight d7. If f4, then I take on e5, and I can take back with the pawn. I can take back the pawn because now this is not possible. I just pin and win the game. And in this position, black is better. However, white can actually just take the bishop, and after rook e8, just bishop h6, or I guess bishop d4 is also fine. But I think bishop h6 is okay. Actually, no. I think that. Wait a second. I think that bishop h6 and then rook e3, bishop e3. And this is equal because white gets a rook, a bishop, and a pawn, which is technically equal material to a queen. So, but he went bishop c5 instead. He got scared, which is very reasonable, and he didn't take it. So here I went rook e8, and now I have a great center and a very great position. So here, castle, I played knight d7, just kicking this bishop, and also give the square to my queen, and also adding a lot of protection to this pawn with the bishop and the knight. So bishop to a3, trying to still control the f8 square and this diagonal, and queen b6, offering a queen trade. I mean, since my opponent is 1,000, I figure that he might not be good at endgames. And I am very confident in my endgame, especially when I figure that my opponent probably doesn't know the endgame well enough. And for some reason, he just took right away. And pawn takes, and now we're in an endgame where I have a very clear plan of trying to push these pawns. And the pieces here are looking a little bit silly. So here, rook a to c1, which is a very questionable move because I assume that he wants to push c4, which is understandable. However, I don't think that should be the main plan. If I was playing this, I would probably play something like rook a d1 or rook fe1, trying to, I don't know, contest the center here, so that the pawns wouldn't be pushed. Maybe rook a d1 is fine. But here, since rook ac1, I found bishop h6 and start pinning this rook and the knight. And from here, I just kind of outplay my opponent. So rook fd1 and e4, opening up the e5 square for the knight to come in. And sure, if white tries to stop with bishop d6, let's say, now I get a free pawn on a2. This is a problem with a bishop on a3 and an open file for the rook, right? So here, rook c2, white is trying to move the knight. Knight to e5, I just go with my plan, and now I'm going to have a knight on d3, and I have a great position. So knight to f1, and now knight to c4, and because the knight moved away. Here, if white wants to keep the structure here, probably knight b1 was better. But I mean, you look at his position, a knight on b. Who wants a knight on b1? So knight to f1, right? In the game, I at least have e3 and g3 to go to. So here, when knight c4, and now white loses something, I guess. And also, the bishop is partially trapped. I mean, you go bishop b4, I just take this pawn. And also, there's potential of c5, where the bishop has no square to go. And And now bishop can't go back to a3 anymore because the rook is pinned. So it just went rook a1, trying to protect the a2 pawn, which is, I guess, understandable. So here I took on a3, pawn takes a3, and here I made a pretty nice in-between move. So here, taking on a3 is okay, but it allows counterplay for white. So here, if I take on a3, then white can play c4. Sure, I have d4, and I'm still completely winning. However, why disconnect your pawn center and allowing some weaknesses in the position when you can just play super accurate and not allow any counterplay, right? So here, I play b5. So just to prevent c4, and then you look, this pawn is not protectable. Now, there's no a4, right? If we push a4, I'm just going to take it and like say, oh, thank you. You know, you've wasted a move for no reason on a lost pawn. So this position, I would say, is pretty much kind of hopeless. So here, my opponent went with knight e3. That's why he played knight f1. And I just simply take on a3. And now here, the point of playing b5 and not allowing c4 is that now there's another weakness on c3. And now you look at it, it's on a dark square, and now I can just move my bishop back to this diagonal. And now I'm going to have a superior position. So g4, I guess, a pretty nice try from my opponent. It actually somehow took me a little bit here to actually find bishop g7 attacking here, because I wanted to trade the knight. Just trade the knight off and get it done with and all that stuff. Play a symbol. But then I was like, okay, bishop g7, and now I don't know, and now here's the thing, like if knight d1 or rook c1, then now my opponent position is even worse. Like just get more and more passive for no reason. But here, I think this is where my opponent just kind of officially collapsed, like, because there's not that much going on for white anymore. And the thing of lower rated player is that when a player wants to see if they're losing, then they tend to just collapse. That's kind of what happens. So here, just play G. I just take on c3, rook ac1, I go b4, and knight d1, I just go d4. And here after knight c3, pawn takes c3. We still play on, but I stopped putting in moves here because the position is pretty much over. If you look at this position, right? I have protected pass pawns, and I have 4 pawns at the center that are basically unsolvable. And I mean, what are you gonna do? You go king f1. I'm just gonna go here. And the thing is, you have to keep. You don't want me to push. You have to keep 2 rooks. But here now I'm attacking this pawn again. So rook a1, I just go d3, and there's nothing going. And there's nothing white can do in this position. Like just d2. I mean, rook c d2 again, I guess. Or I mean, or here I just go c2, and now this pawn is lost. So yeah, I went on to checkmate my opponent, and my team now have another sweep, easy 4-0. My whole team won, and we're going 2 out of 3 in the tournament. Even though this is a quick game, it allows me to test out things that I haven't explored before. I mean, this is the very first time I played a modern in a official. Even though my opponent is 1,000, you know, he still kind of got me good in the opening. If not because my opponent played inaccurate in the middle game, right? Then I might have go into some trouble. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.